Hello and welcome to another live stream. We're going to be talking Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And so far, in the minimal amount of testing that I've done, I've found that the 3.5 Sonnet is by far the best thing I've ever seen. There's a lot of talk about which model is the best and everything like that. And it really does depend on what specifically you're trying to accomplish. Some cases GPT-4 is better. In some cases Claude is better. Some cases you could even go with GPT 3.5 and it would be just as good as anything you'd get out of Claude or anything like that. But on this channel we're all about writing, and so today we're going to be testing a lot of different writing related use cases. I see a couple of people in the chat already talking about things, which is awesome. Steven says he's been testing it a few days for developmental editing, and I have to say it's brilliant. So that's really cool. I find AI really struggles with editing, and so I'm hopeful that in our testing today, we will see some improvement there. So let's go ahead and try it. I am right now in Open Router, and I've got 4 models queued up here. I've got Claude 3.5 Sonnet, of course. And we're going to be testing it against Claude 3 Opus, because according to Anthropic, Claude 3.5 Sonnet actually beats Claude 3 Opus, and it's a fifth of the cost of the Claude 3 Opus. We've got also the old Claude 3 Sonnet, and then I threw in GPT-4o for good measure because it was supposedly the new king of the different models out there. I wasn't finding it to be very great for writing prose, but still in most areas it was doing really, really well. And so I thought we'd throw it in there just to compare. And because we're using Open Router, I'll be able to put in a chat here, and then it will give us output for all 4 of these models all at once, which is the idea. So we can more easily compare things. Dak Forrest says, got some really creative brainstorming ideas from Sonnet 3.5. That's cool. So we'll definitely do a brainstorming thing, but I kind of wanted to start with the thing that we all want, right? Which is like, can it write good prose? I mean, I guess not everybody wants that because, not everyone wants to use AI for the prose writing part, but, so we're going to run this scene here. Rather than do it here inside of Novel Crafter, we're going to just grab the prompt. Let's see. Preview final prompt. And then we're going to copy the XML to the clipboard. So this way we can test it with 4 different models at once, which you can't do in Novel Crafter, as far as I know. So we'll paste in this prompt here, and it should write the first couple hundred words of the scene with all of these different models. And so let's go ahead and see what it gives us. One of the things that I find is the biggest struggle, and one of the reasons why I find Claude 3 is the best series of models overall, is this concept in writing that we call show don't tell. You'll hear it all the time. Newer writers get very frustrated with this concept of show don't tell, including myself when I was a newer writer, because it's really hard to sort of understand where to use it and where not to use it, and when you're using it and when you're not using it, when you're just starting out. And it took me quite a few editors and coaches and people pointing it out in my writing before I started to get to the point where I'm like, okay, that's what it is. And then I started seeing it everywhere in other people's writing. I'd say really only the top 1 to 5% of writers can do it really well, which is why AI typically does it very poorly. But Claude, especially the Claude 3 models, I have found do it better than any of the other models. And so hopefully I'll be able to show you some examples here. SD Houston says, made friends with the like button. Thank you. The like button needs more friends for sure. Scott says, show don't tell is also used a lot in comic making exercises to not use word bubbles. That's an excellent point. And it's even used in film. because for example, so a good example of someone who does this beautifully in film is Steven Spielberg. He kind of he was a master at this. So a good example, this is where he would try to use visual imagery without using dialogue, or like obviously showing things on screen. And so probably the best example I can think of this is the moment in Jurassic Park where you first hear the T-Rex is coming, and you don't see, you hear a low thumping. Man, I can talk today. And then you see the water in the glass ripple, right? That's a good example of a way to visually show, not tell. And film has to do it to a certain extent, because film has one disadvantage over books, and that is they can't know what's going on in people's heads. And so sometimes you have to use visual images to sort of represent what's going on in people's heads, or represent what's happening. You look at Blake Snyder's stuff in Save the Cat. He's got this idea of the opening and closing image. I did a whole video where I talked about it. And that's because, being able to encapsulate something in an image rather than like actually just telling you in dialogue or in thoughts is usually a better way to go about that. So that's like one aspect of show don't tell, but there's also other things going on. So anyway, enough of me talking. Let's go ahead and look at what we got here. So let's start with GPT-4.0. Mina and Jonathan stepped out of the carriage, the wheels clicking softly onto the cobblestone road. Before them loomed the large stone building of the Strand, its shadowy form blending seamlessly into the velvety night. Very GPT-ish, for sure. The gas lamps along the street cast pools of golden light, illuminating clusters of pedestrians. See, who says clusters of pedestrians? Like, seriously. All chattering and bustling about their nightly ventures. The sheer number of people milling around made Mina's skin prickle with unease. So it's very, typical GPT-4, very overdramatic. Kind of hard to say exactly what the issue is, but it's just lots of adjectives. It seems to think that the more adjectives, the better. But yeah, that's all right. Claude 3.5 Sonnet, the old sonnet. Mina and Jonathan stepped out of the carriage in front of a large stone building on the Strand. See, this is much more just matter of fact. We don't need to throw in a bunch of adjectives, right? It was late at night, so Mina didn't have to worry about the sunlight, but the street was much busier than she was accustomed to. See, this is a good example of telling when you should be showing. Because it's telling us that she didn't have to worry about sunlight, right? It was late at night, so Mina didn't have to worry about sunlight, but the street was much busier than she was accustomed to. What would be a better way to show this, right? To show that she was like that the street is busier through her reactions, or just describing it in more depth. For a moment, she felt uncomfortable. Yeah, the word felt is often a common signpost that you are showing instead of telling, or that you are telling instead of showing. So how could you show that she feels uncomfortable surrounded by so many people? There's a number of different things that you could do, a number of different ways to show it, but you could see her like maybe describe her freezing up as people jostled around her or brushed against her or something like that, instead of just she felt comfortable, right? So this is the kind of thing that I look for a lot when I'm analyzing prose written by human or by AI, is how much telling and showing. It seems to be like the thing that AI struggles with the most. The natural soundingness, for lack of a better term, is of this is fine. It's just, it could be in a little bit deeper, and prompting can help, but it's usually not quite there. So let's look at Claude 3 Opus, previously considered The best one, to see if it does any better. Mina and Jonathan stepped out of their carriage in front of a large stone building on the Strand. It was late at night, so Mina didn't have to worry about sunlight, but the street was a lot busier than she was used to, and she felt uncomfortable surrounded by so many people. See, it's using almost the exact same words, and still having that issue. For a moment, she went into a fight or flight mode. She could almost feel her vampire senses heightening. Let me scroll down here, because actually, let me analyze. Okay, so I neglected to take this into account that that wording that it's using it's pulled straight from my prompt. Because it's a prompt, so obviously I'm not trying to show versus tell. I'm just telling it what I want to happen in the scene. So let's actually read on a little bit. So let's go back to Claude 3 Sonnet here. A strong whiff of blood and sweat from the crowd assaulted her nostrils. So we might almost just get rid of this first paragraph because it really starts to get into the scene right after. A strong whiff of blood and sweat from the crowd assaulted her nostrils, making her throat burn with thirst. Mina tensed, instinctively moving closer to Jonathan as her eyes scanned the massive humanity for any potential threats. She could hear dozens of heartbeats pounding in her ears, a steady thrum like a drumbeat urging her into a predatory frenzy. See, this is much better. This is showing more than telling. Jonathan must have sensed her unease. He touched her elbow gently. Are you all right, my dear? Not the best dialogue. Mina exhaled slowly, reining in her vampiric impulses. Yes, I'm quite well, she lied smoothly, just unaccustomed to crowns since my condition. Okay, so the dialogue's a little cheesy there, but on the whole, that's better. All right, back to Claude 3 Opus. Heartbeats pounded in her ears, blood rushing through her veins in a tantalizing rhythm, the scent of warm flesh assaulting her nostrils, her gums aching as her fangs threatened to elongate. Ooh, I like that. That's a good show, not tell. Jonathan laid a steadying hand on your arm. Mina, are you all right? She blinked and took a shaky breath, willing her instincts to settle. Yes, I'm fine. The crowds are just a lot to take in. He nodded in understanding and tucked her arm in his as they made their way to the auction house entrance. His touch grounded her, reminding Mina of her humanity. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other. So that's good. This is definitely better. The dialogue here is a lot more natural than what we had with the previous version of Sonnet. So that's good. Okay, now for the big reveal, and hopefully this is actually better. Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Mina and Jonathan stepped out of their carriage in front of a large stone building on the Strand. The night air was crisp, and the street bustled with more activity than Mina had anticipated. Gas lamp. This is different than what the other ones almost repeated my prompt verbatim in the first few sentences. This one is not doing that. Gas lamps cast a warm glow over the cobblestones, illuminating the faces of passersby and the gleaming facades of nearby shops. There are ways you could enhance this to show more than tell, but I'm getting really nitpicky here. Not really something that's important. Mina's senses heightened instantly. The cacophony of heartbeats, the rush of blood through the veins, the mingled sense of perfume and sweat, it all assaulted her at once. Her muscles tensed, ready to spring into action. For a terrifying moment, she teetered on the edge of fight or flight. Jonathan must have sensed her unease. He placed a steadying hand on her arm. Are you all right, my dear? He whispered. Mina took a deep breath, forcing herself to relax. Yes, she murmured. It's just rather overwhelming. I'm not sure I like the my dear. It did that in the first version of Sonnet, but there's not necessarily anything objectively wrong with it. Just a preference. She glanced around, noticing the curious looks from passersby. Her gown, a deep crimson velvet that shimmered in the lamplight, certainly drew attention. Jonathan cut a dashing figure in his tailored black suit and top hat. They looked every inch the wealthy couple attending a late-night soiree. Remember, Jonathan said softly, we're simply here to observe. No need to engage unless absolutely necessary. So, guys, this is way better. Like, way, way better. Another thing I'm noticing that it's doing really well, besides showing versus telling, is it's giving more description in doses that make sense. So usually when you're describing things, you want to sort of layer it in and not just give like, here's a giant paragraph of description of the scene, right? And this has done a great job of this. So we had like some brief description of the street right here, and then we went into her point of view. We had some dialogue here, and then we got another little tiny bit of description here. Describing Jonathan and her and what they look like go into this thing, and it's all like perfectly spaced out, and that's like brilliant. I didn't ask it to do any of that. It's just naturally fed that in exactly where it needed to go. So that's like another thing that authors often get really wrong, that it's doing really, really well here. So I'm super excited about that. Gotseat says less info dumpy. Yes, definitely less info dumpy for sure. This sounds very natural to me for the most part. Is it perfect? Of course not, because it's AI. But is this going to, make less editing a thing? Yeah. I would not need to edit this nearly as much as I would have to otherwise. Remember, Jonathan said softly, we're simply here. I kind of like, I'm actually want to just continue reading here. Mina nodded, grateful for his calm presence. She'd insisted on coming. But now that they were here, doubts gnawed her. What if she lost control? What if someone recognized her? What if the brides were here? Of course, this is straying past the prompt, I think, here, so we don't really need to worry about that. Okay, so I think as far as pros go, I'm convinced this is definitely way better. And I've done some testing with this already, and yeah, it does very well. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this chat, and we're going to do some other prompts. If you have things that you would like me to test, let me know inside of the chat, and I'll get to them. But we're going to start with just a basic brainstorming prompt. Let's pick a genre. I'd rather not do sci-fi beach romance right now. Although maybe that would, yeah, let's just go with it, because romance tends to be super cheesy. And so if the AI can accurately do romance in a way that feels more natural, then I'd be all about that. So help me brainstorm 10 that's a 12. 10 ideas for a sci-fi beach romance novel. Formatted to work like a Blake Snyder logline. All right, I think that should be good, and we'll see what each of the different options gives us. All right, so let's start with GPT-4o. Starlit shores. When a skeptical marine biologist and a stranded alien prince find themselves marooned on a deserted tropical island, they must bridge their worlds to survive. Okay, standard stuff like what we've seen before. Old Claude 3. This is one of those things that we might not see huge differences between the models when it comes to brainstorming. This one's not bad, but still pretty. Oh, this is interesting. Claude 3 Opus gave us very succinct options here. Human falls in love with a mermaid, only to discover she must return to the sea when her planet needs her as their new queen. An alien spaceship crash lands on a remote beach. The sole survivor and a human fall in love while racing to stop an intergalactic war. Funny enough, the old Claude 3 Sonnet, I think, adhered to the Blake Snyder logline formula better than Opus did, but that's interesting. All right, let's look at Claude 3.5 Sonnet. A lonely lifeguard, that's good, falls for a mysterious woman who emerges from the sea each night, but must find a way to break the alien curse, keeping her bound to the ocean. That's all right. When a time traveler washes up on a remote beach, a marine biologist must help him return to the future while fighting her growing feelings for him. Okay, that one's not too great. A vacationing cyborg, vacationing cyborg learns to experience human emotions after meeting a free-spirited artist on a holographic beach resort planet. I kind of like that one. An asteroid miner on shore leave encounters her soulmate, only to discover he's an advanced AI in a synthetic body. I like that too. Like, and we get background around the character, like an asteroid miner, right? Like that just adds a little bit of extra depth. A telepathic surfer and an amphibious alien princess team up to prevent an undersea invasion of Earth. That one sounds humorous. Like that could be like I don't know, like a Guardians of the Galaxy plot. On the planet where love is outlawed, two rebels find forbidden romance during a secret meeting on an artificial beach. Yeah, so these aren't bad for sure. But this isn't. This is. Let's do this first one. Clear this and say, I'm looking to brainstorm various additional elements for this story concept. Give me 100 concepts around the following topics. We'll say protagonists, antagonists, subplots, world building. Yeah. Sources of conflict and side characters. Oh, and I totally forgot to include the thing. Try that again. Okay. So let's look at GPT-4o. A marine biologist friend, a retired sailor, teenage protege. Okay, so it's given us a bunch of things. Look at Claude 3 Opus. All right, these aren't too bad with Claude 3 Opus. Let's see what 3.5 Sonnet does. Ooh, hang on. Okay, so let's look at like suggested protagonists here using Claude 3 Opus. We have Jack, a dedicated lifeguard with a tragic past. Sarah, a marine biologist curious about the mysterious woman. Alex, a local surfer who befriends the lifeguard. Emma, a rookie lifeguard learning the ropes. Here we have a shy, introverted lifeguard with a fear of deep water. A marine biologist studying unusual ocean phenomena. A local surfer with a secret connection to the sea. A lighthouse keeper with a tragic past. A Coast Guard officer investigating strange occurrences. So they're not that different from each other, but it does have, like, I'd say a deeper sense of what good conflict is. Like this fear of deep water. Like it's interesting that it's just throwing that in there as like, here's an additional source of conflict for this character. I like that. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm not seeing huge differences for this, but that's okay. Like, this is the sort of thing that pretty much all AI models are not bad at. Just brainstorming ideas. But I would say, just from what I'm looking at, let's look at the subplots. The lifeguard's effort to teach the woman about human life and love. The mysterious woman's search for a way to break her curse. See, these are like full plots. A subplot involving a local surfing legend and his connection to the woman. Maybe. Town's annual beach cleanup and conservation efforts. That one might work too. Let's look at subplots for 3.5 Sonnet. A murder mystery involving beached marine life. Maybe. A local fishing industry threatened by changing tides. A documentary crew investigating paranormal activity. A budding romance between two supporting characters. A search for a long-lost underwater civilization. A time-sensitive mission to save an endangered species. Struggle to keep the beach open despite strange events. These are actually all pretty good, and they fit the idea of a subplot much better than Claude 3 Opus did, because Opus was giving us some plots that were really like that could be the whole main plot or a major part of the external plot, and these could all work as actual subplots. So I'm impressed by that. Yeah, I like that. So I'd give 3.5 Sonnet the edge when it comes to brainstorming, for sure. Let's go and see how well it does. Well, hang on. I want to do some developmental editing with it. But it so happens I have an outline that was finished relatively recently. If I can find it. Okay. This is a big long outline here. Let's go ahead and clear this chat. Here is an outline I'm working on. Please analyze it as a developmental editor would. Look specifically for plot holes, ways to improve on the character development, potential pacing issues, etc. Now, paste in the giant thing. Okay, let's see what GPT-4o is starting to tell us here. Wow. Okay, we have Guinevere's motivation. While we see Guinevere's dedication to her people, her internal conflict about her role in the future could be deepened. Consider adding more scenes to highlight her personal stakes and fears about taking on more responsibility. Yeah, this is just telling us things that sound right. Let's look at Claude 3 Opus. Character development of Guinevere is strong. She starts as a young woman trying to help her people and grows into a more confident and capable leader throughout the story. So it's giving us some strengths and then potential areas of improvement. Pacing. Some chapters seem to move quickly through events, while others linger on conversations and introspection. Considering, I should have included in the prompt for it to give examples. It doesn't seem to be any major plot holes, but make sure to address how Guinevere's absence from the castle is explained and how she managed to sneak out undetected multiple times. Yeah, so that's not bad. Okay, let's look at Claude 3.5 3.5 Sonnet. All right, so it did the same thing where it gave me strengths and then areas of improvement. The premise is intriguing, but Guinevere being kidnapped by bandits and developing with Gwen. Okay, so character development for Guinevere is strong, showing her growth from a sheltered princess to someone more aware of the kingdom's issues. Political backdrop adds depth to the story with mentions of Arthur, Lot, and the threat of Saxons. Areas for improvement, pacing. The middle section, chapters 15 through 30, feels repetitive, with Guinevere repeatedly interacting with different bandits. Consider condensing these chapters to maintain momentum. That's actually much more specific, and I would have to really like go through the outline and make sure I agree with it, but it certainly sounds better. Character development. While Guinevere's arc is well developed, some secondary characters like Leodegrance and Arundel could use more depth. Consider giving them more distinct motivations and conflicts. The main conflict and stakes aren't clear until later in the story. Consider introducing the central conflict, Guinevere wanting to help the common people, earlier and build tension around it throughout. I kind of disagree with that one. So, world building. The political landscape could be more clearly established early on. This would help readers understand the stakes and context of Guinevere's actions. Tension. There's potential for more tension throughout. Considering adding more immediate threats or conflicts to keep readers engaged. So on the whole, like I think what it's saying makes more sense. I think we're still running into the issue that you run into with editing using any AI, and that is like it's just kind of telling you what sounds right. But I think as the AI gets better, that's going to be less of an issue, and it will tell you things that sound right because they are right. Okay. So that's good there. I'm actually curious. Let's do a outlining prompt. I'm going to we'll go with the same Guinevere book thing, except I'm going to I have an earlier version that's not fully fleshed out. Actually, let's do this one. Nope, that's the one that's all finished. Hold up. All right, so here's just a document. I have some basic information about characters, about a plot. This is a different book about Merlin. Some notes on world building, some notes on the series, and then I have this out. This is my 40 chapter plot module. So basically, I'm going to take this entire document and say, here is a document for prepping an outline of this novel. Using the outline template provided, create a full 40 chapter outline for this book. Yeah, let's just start with that and just see how they compare to the other models. This is probably costing me a lot because I'm running 4 different models at once, including Claude 3 Opus, which is an expensive one. All right, let's start with GPT-4o. Act 1, prologue. Scene: Adwin's flight from an angry mob, baby Merlin in her arms, dark, tense, importance, introduces the oppressive atmosphere and sets a harsh tone. Number 1, unusual day. 15-year-old Merlin wakes up in his humble home, wishes to be accepted and attends the village church seeking education. The villagers and priests' hostility, need, trust in himself, flaw, deep-seated self-doubt. Home environment briefly shows Merlin's relationship with his mother, Adwin. So this is not really useful. it like gives us some like very brief overview of what's going on in the scene, but it's not giving us very good specifics on what should be happening in the scene. So I'm not really too happy with that. I could ask it to get more specific, but really we're just here to compare the models against each other. Let's go look at what Claude 3 Opus gives us. Prologue: an angry mob wielding torches and pitchforks chases Adwin, cradling newborn Merlin out of the village. Unusual day: 15-year-old Merlin, living in poverty with his mother Adwin, experiences oppression from the villagers. Despite this, he shows kindness to a stray animal, revealing his good nature. Yeah, that's save the cat moment. Merlin has strange visions of the future, hinting at his unique powers, but he is distracted by the villagers' taunts. Adwin tells Merlin that true strength lies in compassion, not power. This is better, but it's still not very specific. And it's probably not being specific because I asked it to give me all like 40 chapters, and because of that, it's having to just go really briefly over each chapter. So maybe in the if I try this again, we do it with like 10 chapters at a time instead of 40. So here's Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Prologue: an angry mob with torches chases Adwin, cradling newborn Merlin out of the village. That's pretty much the same. 15-year-old Merlin struggles to fit in, experiences visions he can't control. He wants to be accepted and considered joining the church for education. Merlin helps an elderly villager, showcasing his kindness despite his reputation. Strange occurrences in the village linked to Merlin's presence. Theme stated: what truly makes a person good? Merlin dismisses the importance of this question. So that's better. It's definitely following my instructions pretty well. I think the problem here is I didn't give it the best instructions. So we're going to try this prompt again. And I'm going to give it some better instructions here. So the following is some information for a book about a young Merlin. Using the outline template provided, write a detailed summary of the first 10 chapters. Make sure to go into specific detail instead of vague hints about each chapter and the specifics of what happens in that chapter. Let's see if this is any better. All right, I'm just going to look at 3.5 here. Based on the provided information, yeah, okay. Prologue: story opens in 431 BCE with a vivid scene of Adwin, Merlin's mother, cradling her newborn son as she flees from an angry mob in the small village in Defed, Wales. The villager, led by a zealous priest, pursues her with torches and pitchforks, accusing her of consorting with demons. This sets the tone for the conflict and persecution that Merlin will face throughout his life. Okay, there's definitely more detail in there. Not necessarily useful detail, but it's there. The unusual day. We jump forward 15 years to 446 CE. Merlin, now a teenager, lives with his mother in a small cottage on the outskirts of a different village. He desperately wants to be accepted by the villagers and dreams of becoming educated. His mother, Adwin, ekes out a living through the charity of others, teaching Merlin to be kind despite their hardships. Merlin experiences a vision of the future which frightens and confuses him, highlighting his deep distrust in himself. He decides to disguise himself and seek education from the local church, hoping it will lead to acceptance. Mystery and theme. As Merlin approaches the church, he overhears a conversation between two priests discussing strange occurrences in the area. They mention demonic activity and the need for an exorcism. Merlin, curious but wary, lingers to learn more. A kind older priest notices him and engages in conversation, stating that true goodness comes from within, not from outward appearance or societal expectations. This introduces the theme of the nature of a good person, which Merlin fails to fully grasp at this moment. Yeah, so this is definitely better. Definitely better. And much closer to what I would actually want myself. Now, outlining is one of those things I'm very picky on, and I tend to just write it all myself because I can never get the AI to get close enough. It just requires me, like, I can get the AI to do something, but then I often rewrite everything myself. So for that reason, like, I'm very picky, but this is definitely very much closer to what I was going for. So let's try writing some beats. So if we take this opening, let's take this prologue. Go ahead and clear this. Using the following chapter summary, write, let's say 16 beats, giving the specific actions of the scene, including blocking of characters. I don't know if it's going to understand what I mean by blocking there, but let's see. Their emotional let's see. Adwen's emotional reactions and how she is feeling. I'm just like totally making this prompt up right now, so it's not even necessarily a good prompt. But I want to make sure we're getting all of these things and make sure that the scene has a clear beginning, middle, and end. Includes a catalyst that gets the scene going, mounting conflict, and a climactic moment, followed by 1 to 2 beats of resolution. And we give it the chapter summary. Let's look at GPT-4o. So we have beginning of flames. The scene opens with Adwen cloaked and disheveled, cradling her newborn son, Merlin. The faint glow of torches flickers in the distance as she huddles behind a cluster of trees. Number 2, the angry mob led by a zealous priest begins their pursuit, torches lighting up the night. Adwen looks back, then starts running, careful to shield Merlin's fragile body. Desperation, Adwen's grip tightens around Merlin, determined to keep him safe. Echoes of accusation, finding a path. Okay, actually, GPT-4o isn't too bad here. Let's look at Opus. Much simpler here, for sure. Adwen, exhausted and frightened, clutches her newborn son close to her chest as she dashes through the dark, narrow streets of the small village in Deaford, Wales. I don't even know if I'm spelling that or saying that correctly. So if you live in Wales, I apologize. The sound of angry shouts and the flickering light of torches grow closer, causing Adwen's heart to race and her breath to come in short gasps. The zealous priest leading the mob spots Adwen and points accusingly at her, shouting, "There she is, the witch who consorted with demons." Yeah, so this is like, okay. A little bit on the nose. Let's see what Sonnet, the new Sonnet, has for us. Adwen cradles her newborn son, Merlin, in a dimly lit hut, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. Distant shouts and a flickering torchlight appears through the cracks in the wooden walls. Adwen's heart races as she realizes the villagers are coming for her and her child. She quickly wraps Merlin in a blanket and gathers a small satchel of supplies. The sounds of angry voices grow louder, and Adwen feels a surge of panic. I actually like the scene a little better because she's not running from the get-go. She's like starting out in this little hut. She takes a deep breath. Tears stream down her face. Adwen's lungs burn as she pushes herself to run faster. The forest edge, so she's going towards the forest. The villager grabs at her cloak, nearly causing her to stumble. With a burst of adrenaline, Adwen breaks free and plunges into the dark forest. She continues to run, branches whipping at her face until the sound of pursuit fades. Exhausted and relieved, Adwen collapses against the tree, holding Merlin close and whispering promises of protection. Yeah. So looking at Claude 3 Opus, the climax at the end is like, as the mob's anger reaches a fever pitch, Edwin closes her eyes, praying for a miracle to save her and her child. Suddenly, a blinding light fills the shed, and a powerful ethereal voice commands the mob to disperse, declaring that the child is under divine protection. That wasn't in the prompt. And definitely not an actually like a good thing. And I really like this one that 3.5 Sonnet gave us. It's much more practical and kind of fits the scene. So, how about that? That's not bad. I'm gonna follow this up. Flesh each beat out a little more to add more description and specifics on what is happening, as if you were preparing it for a ghostwriter to write the scene. Certainly, here's a more detailed version of each beat. In a small thatched-roof hut in Deafid, Wales, Adwin sits on a rough-hewn wooden stool, cradling her newborn son Merlin. The room is dimly lit by a single candle, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Adwin's eyes dart nervously toward the door, her body tense with anticipation. Let's scroll down to the bottom here. Adwin's legs burn with exertion as she pushes herself to run faster. The edge of the forest seems to taunt her, appearing no closer despite her efforts. Her lungs ache, and each breath feels like fire in her chest. Still, she presses on, the sound of pursuit spurring her forward. Just as the trees are within reach, Adwin feels a sharp tug on her cloak. A villager she once considered a friend, Tom the baker, has managed to grab the fabric. For a heart-stopping moment, Adwin feels herself being pulled backward, her feet slipping on the damp grass. In a surge of desperate strength, Adwin twists her body, simultaneously protecting Merlin and wrenching her cloak free. The sudden movement causes Tom to lose his balance and fall. Without looking back, Adwin plunges into the dark forest, branches whipping at her face and pulling at her hair. Adwin continues to run, weaving between trees and leaping over fallen logs. The sound of pursuit gradually fades, replaced by normal nighttime sounds of the forest. Still, she pushes on, fear driving her deeper into the wilderness. Finally, when she can run no more, Adwin collapses against the trunk of a massive oak tree. She slides down to sit at its base, her legs trembling with exhaustion. Merlin begins to fuss, and she gently rocks him, whispering soothing words. As her breathing slowly returns to normal, Adwin looks up at the stars peeking through the canopy above. She makes a solemn vow to her son, promising to protect him and help him understand the great power she knows lies dormant within him. Way better. Not bad at all. I usually write my beats. This is an instance where I might just be okay with generating the beats and then editing them in places. Like there's some things in this final beat that I think, yeah, it's a little cheesy, a little on the nose, but like, yeah. So yeah, I'm excited with that. I'm pretty good with that. So one thing, so Kevin says, I'm not a fan of Claude for nonfiction. It hallucinates a lot. GPT-4o needs to find evidence and research, or you need to do it yourself. Then Claude does a great job, and that doubles the cost. But that doubles the cost, yeah. That's another thing I wanted to test. Let me see if it can write. Now, I do this anyway. Like, I do not, when I'm writing nonfiction, I make sure all of the details are provided. I just don't, like, I'll find articles and things out there that have the information that I want, and I'll include it in the prompt. And yes, it makes the prompt more expensive, but that's just how I do it. Perplexity, if you saw one of my previous videos or live streams, we did a video on Perplexity, and it does better at getting facts right. So you can also look at that if you want. But hang on and let me find. Let me find a prompt here. This will be a very long prompt. And I might not do it in Open Router. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, let's go to Claude here. I'm going to paste in this ginormous prompt, and we're going to use Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I've also, so Claude has enabled a new experimental feature called, oh gosh, hang on. Artifacts, duh. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to help us in this particular case, or if it will, but I have that enabled, so it's a new feature. It's like an interfacing feature, I think. Yep, see, artifacts. So it says, like, here is the 40,000 word article on Helen of Troy, incorporating the background information provided and following the outline style and structure. And then it's like, okay, here's the document, and it opens the document over here. Okay, so this introduction's a little cheesy to me. Helen of Troy, a name that has echoed through the ages. That sounds almost like a GPT thing to say. Conjuring images of unparalleled beauty and devastating war. But who was this woman whose face was said to have launched 1,000 ships? Was she a victim of the gods' machinations, a willing participant in her own scandalous tale, or something in between? In this comprehensive exploration, we'll delve into the myth, the history, and the enduring... Yeah, so some of this I wouldn't necessarily keep. But it is going through everything in my outline. So just so everyone is aware, this is what my prompt looked like. It's a long prompt. Because I've taken several other articles and things and included it in there, but I have instructions. I have the style that I want it to be written in. That actually might be some of the issue, that I might not need all of that style issue. And then I have keywords that I want to make sure it covers inside of the article. And then I have an outline. Which I believe it is following family. Okay, it looks like it got cut off here. But still, it wrote a whole bunch of stuff here. So that's kind of cool. And I like the interface with artifacts, the new experimental feature, where it's like giving the response here, but then there's like, since it knows it's writing an article, it sort of like puts that into a self-contained document here. So I could X out of that, and now this little bit is, it's just cleaner, right? So I can click on this and it will open up that again and so forth. Oh, Claude's response was limited as it hit the maximum length allowed at this time. Yeah, so that's why I did that. Okay, so a couple of good things here. I want to do another editing, but in this case, instead of doing developmental editing, I'm going to give it, well, let's give it a chapter that was recently written that I haven't gone over yet. Rather than using an AI chapter. Oh, and I also want to do a show don't tell prompt to see if I can get it to expand. All right, follow the fairy. Here is a chapter from a book. Give me suggestions on how I can improve it. And actually, you are an expert line editor. Focus on sentence structure. repeated words and other ways of making it sound natural. Paste in the chapter. And I'm getting ready to wrap up the tests that I'm doing here because, I mean, it's very clear that 3.5 Sonnet is awesome. But if you have any other specific prompts or things you want me to run through it, let me know in the chat. And also feel free to ask me just general questions because I'll take a little bit of time to go over those. It's almost lunchtime here where I'm at, so I'll just go until lunchtime, I think. All right. Let's start with GPT-4o. Here are some line-by-line suggestions for improving the chapter, focusing on sentence structure, repeated words, making it sound more natural. What if George catches sight of you up here? Okay, it looks like it just rewrote things. Didn't actually give me suggestions, so let's look at Claude 3 Opus. Very sentence structure. Some paragraphs have sentences that start with the same word or have similar structure. Try to mix it up to create a more dynamic flow. Examples, instead of Una focused on the feel of her hand and George's as Gloriana's soft musical voice echoed through the courtyard. She spoke in an... You could write as Gloriana's soft musical voice echoed through the courtyard. Una focused on the feel of her hand and George's, speaking first in ancient language understood by the woodland animals. Yeah, that's not exactly better. So let's try 3.5 Sonnet. Sentence structure. Vary the sentence length. For example, in the opening paragraph, you could combine some shorter sentences. Una turned at the sound of Amaret's voice, forcing a smile that vanished as quickly as it came. Sensing her friend's discomfort, Amaret stepped into the balcony and took Una's hand in hers. Dialogue tags. Yeah, so this is it's pointing things out pretty well here. Sonnet is, but it would still be a fair amount of work to actually go through and edit these yourself, and it would be nice if it could do it on its own. I'm curious. I'm going to go into Novel Crafter here. I've got a show don't tell prompt that I've sort of abandoned because and I think I'm gonna clone it. And this one, okay, so we'll just do, I'm gonna try two different show don't tell prompts, one that's super simple like this, and one that's much more complex and has examples and things like that. This one I've tried to use with other with other models, and it just doesn't seem to do very well with it. So we're going to go here and actually give it a try. Oh, and the other thing I need to make sure I do with these is we need to make sure that the model is added. So we got 3.5 Sonnet. And for the second one too, make sure to add 3.5 Sonnet. So let's go, let's just find a place here. No, that's not a bad chapter, actually. Let's just go to the prologue. Oh, no, that's not right either. Hang on. All right, here's a good paragraph that could use more showing versus telling. Rounding a corner, Mina spotted him at last. Her target swaggered down the alley ahead, the fading light glinting off the pistol at his hip. Mina's lips curled with disgust. She'd been following for weeks, watching him issue bribes and pay business owners to look the other way, a petty criminal, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so we're going to try the first one. This is the good one with all of the examples in it. Rounding a corner, Mina's eyes locked onto her core. The man sauntered down the alley ahead, his gait exuding her unearned confidence. The last ray of sunlight caught the metallic gleam of a pistol at his hip, a silent threat to any who dared cross him. This is an example of it trying to show and not doing a very good job. It's just adding stuff, and now it sounds more like GPT-4. Mina's upper lip twitched, her nose wrinkled as if assaulted by a foul stench. For weeks, she'd shadowed his every move, witnessing crisp bills exchanging hands. It's like adding more adjectives and stuff like that. Not necessarily what we want, unfortunately. So let's try the simpler one. The stench of rotting garbage assaulted Mina's nostrils as she rounded the corner, her heart quickening at the sight of him. There he was, that arrogant beatered, swaggering down the alley as if he owned it. The fading sunlight caught the steel of his pistol, a silent threat hanging on at his hip. Bile rose in Mina's throat. For weeks, she shadowed him, her fingers itching to wrap around his throat. With each bribe, he slipped across countertops. Each time, he leaned close to a shopkeeper, whispering promises of protection. The memory of his smug grin made her teeth grind. He thought himself untouchable, a puppeteer pulling strings in his little criminal world, but Mina knew better. This weasel was just a cog in a much darker machine, the smuggling ring. The very thought of it sent ice through her veins. Not just contraband, but people, children, their terrified faces haunting her dreams, driving her restlessly forward. Guys, this is way better. It's not perfect. It's still a little bit like too much, a little over the top, but way better than that old prompt that I did. And I just had to give it a very simple like prompt that just said show more than tell. Maybe that's all you need to do sometimes. So let's go ahead and discard this. Curious also, I'm going to run a few of my other old prompts. Adverbs. Go ahead and add the model here. The flesh-eating reading ease score. I'm not sure if there are any adverbs here. Supposedly. Well, let's try the adverbs one. Yeah, that didn't really make a difference, but I'm interested about the flesh reading e-score. Yeah, that's better. I'll keep that prompt. All right. So to go through some of your questions, we've got Dulce asks, will you try the sci-fi beach romance on the new Claude? I did do a little bit of brainstorming in the sci-fi beach romance thing. But if you're talking about like doing the whole thing using nothing but prompts, no. I did that. I finished it. It's available for free. I will probably do it again, but I'm going to wait a year or so. I'm not going to do it with every new model that comes up. I'm just going to let a couple of new models come up. And then in a year from now, I'll kind of judge, okay, which model do I think is the best? And then I'll do it again with that. So yeah. Have you found that the quality of Claude changes when you use straight Claude and when you use Claude and Novel Crafter? Maybe 3.5 will fix this. No, not really. If you're using the exact same prompts. So for instance, the first prompt that I ran here, in Novel Crafter, you can take the prompt that you're giving it and say preview final prompt, and then you can copy this exact prompt, including all of the things that you're prompting it with, which is a long prompt. And then you can take it into like Claude here, if you're using Claude, or you can do it in Open Router and paste it here. And if I do it this way, in general, it's going to be more or less the same. So yeah, that's going to be more or less the same as if I were to just come here and let's make sure we're using the 3.5. Okay, that was actually really weird. Hang on. That did not do what I asked it to. There we go. So it's going to be very similar for sure. But there's lots of like prompting going on behind the scenes in Novel Crafter, so you have to make sure you're using the exact same prompt to get the exact same results. David Wright says it's easier to cut back than to build up. Yeah, maybe. Reading with Love says, got no heads up you were live. Sorry about that. I tend to just, well, in this case, it was kind of a last minute thing because 3.5 was revealed late yesterday. So decided, normally I wouldn't have had a video go out today, but I decided to do a live. So bottom line on 3.5, I'd say in almost every test that I've done, I can see a noticeable improvement. Is it perfect? No. But I would go so far as to say that for fiction writing purposes, for writing purposes in general, it's the best one. Hands down. Better than GPT-4o, better than Claude 3 Opus, and it's like a fifth of the price of Claude 3 Opus, which is great. Now, I say that with some trepidation because it often depends on the specific task that you're giving it. There are going to be some things that GPT-4o might be better for than others. But in general, like if you could only use one, this would now be my number one pick, I think. If you could only use one. Because it seems to do every single task pretty well. So, okay. Any other questions that you guys have? I'll be sure to cover them in the five more minutes that we've got here. Otherwise, I think that'll about do it. I'm just trying to think of any other prompts I want to test. But I'm excited to start using this more. We're going to start, at some point I'm going to start doing some live streams where I'm going to be rewriting this book. I wrote this back in November using Claude 2. And using it, back then we didn't have Novel Crafter, and I was using just a super prompt method inside of Claude in here, which is not really the most easy way to do it now. So I'm hoping to do that soon as well. Next, just to get people pumped up, next Monday, I believe, Monday, I have another like extra deep dive video coming out that's going to give you everything you need to know about uploading a book to Amazon and everything you need to succeed there on Amazon. It'll be really fun. SD Houston says it all changes so fast. Yes, it does. Although I'd say a lot of the prompting methods and everything more or less stay the same now. You'll tweak things here and there depending on the model that you're using, because some models do better. But on the whole, like I find that a lot of my methods are no longer changing, or at least they're not changing as much. I just plug in a better model and it just does better with the techniques that I'm using. Debbie asked a good question. Do you really think this is such a huge improvement? For writing prose, at least for the tests I've done, yes. I have found that it's like comparable to GPT-4 over GPT 3.5, or to Claude 3 over Claude 2. It's definitely better. Not just a marginal improvement, but a noticeable improvement in the actual prose writing, for sure. Hi, Claude 3 can't mimic one's own writing prose like 2.0 and 2.1. What's your opinion on that? I am not sure I agree with you on that. Claude 3, I found, mimics my prose way better than Claude 2 does. And Claude 2.1 was a disaster. So I'm not really sure where you're getting that, because I find the complete opposite to be true there. And I imagine that Claude 3.5 Sonnet is probably better as well. So yeah. But yeah, there's definitely been some improvements on the prose. For sure. Okay, I'm going to wrap that up then. Thank you all for your questions and for joining me today. Again, bottom line, I think this is at least a marginal improvement in pretty much every area of writing that I've tested it on. It'll get the job done, I think. And yeah, so that's it. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I'll see you Monday. I've got a video coming out, so